and welcome to yet another edition of Expressions with the New Indian Express. I have with me Ram Madhav ji and Mr. Chawla, the editorial director of the New Indian Express. Mr. Madhav's new book, Because India Comes First, is a remarkable collection of essays which looks at India's position in the world, which looks at our foreign policy, which looks at the way forward for India in the globe. And we're going to be talking to the former General Secretary of the BJP and member of the Board of Governors of the India Foundation about it in detail. At a very momentous time, Mr. Madhav, when there's a new government in the US. And one of the things that you talked of in your book, you talk about the two kinds of responses one can have, the Finlandization and the wolf warrior approach of China. I found those very interesting. Which one of those should India be in this new world?
Uh, I only always, in fact, I wrote about it in some of my articles also that India should always be very pragmatic in its approach, neither Finlandization nor the kind of diplomacy which is nowadays described as the wolf warrior diplomacy that countries like China practice. India has to have a very pragmatic approach to its international relations policy. But I would like to add one thing here, which I have not done so far in my articles, of course, not even in this book, uh, is that, something that China nowadays practices. It is called big power diplomacy. Now, big power diplomacy is not just about the size of the country, the population, the economic prosperity. No, it's not that. It's an attitude. You have to actually start behaving like a big power. It's not enough to have populations. It's not enough to have, this leadership, a strong leadership like the one that we have today. We have to develop that attitude, which these days, if you notice, China displays it very conspicuously. It's a big power, no doubt, but also it behaves like one. That is where this big power diplomacy, which is now slowly gaining currency in the world, is something that probably India has to now learn to adopt, develop that kind of attitude. That I feel is it should be the way forward for our diplomacy.
But Ram Madhavji, that can only come if India does indeed become a big economic power. We are still not exactly a big economic power, and as we've seen, the last quarter of economic growth has been quite disappointing, and we are sort of struggling. So, how does one become a big power without having the uh, economic size of China?
Economy of the country plays an important role, no doubt. But if you look at the behavior of the countries, many other countries in the world, which are far behind us in terms of their economic strength, but those countries play a very important role in world politics. I mean, I don't want to demean any particular country. I don't want to demean. That's why I don't want to take the names of any countries. India is the fifth largest economic power in the world. We are not a small country. We are a big economic power. It's no, of course, no doubt, we need to do much more in terms of strengthening our domestic economy, strengthening our economic situation in the country. But in the world, we are recognized as a big country, important country. I think we have necessary qualifications to be a big power.
Rambhaduji, I'll ask one question because before you are defining the big economic power, in terms of GDP, yes, we are the fifth largest economy in the world. But I take as the percentage of the total GDP of the world, what is our percentage as compared to the population of India? That will give a different picture altogether because I'm an economist by education and by teaching as well. And other question which I want, what is this Finlandization of what you have spoken about with Kaveri? Kaveri, I read the book, I have not read it because you told me you wrote in somewhere that is a collection of essays and articles which you have written earlier. But I would like to have this term which you have used. What does it mean, by the way?
No, one approach is that to become subservient completely. You will always play the role of a second fiddle. See, in the world, different types of diplomacies have been practiced by different countries. Some countries are always happy to be in the company of big countries. They are happy to play the second fiddle as long as their interests are secured. Some countries, in fact, I would like to take you back to China again here. China, under Deng Xiaoping, used to play this very conscious role of an underdog. In fact, Deng used to specifically say that hide your strengths, bide your time, don't show off your strengths. That was Deng's policy, which suited that country at that time. But today, look at Xi Jinping. He flaunts his power so openly today. He wears it on his sleeves. So that is what we today call as wolf warrior diplomacy, the aggression that is shown here. For in India's case, since Kaveri raised this issue of how can we consider ourselves a big power when economically we are not very strong, let me recall that when Prime Minister Nehru was at the helm of affairs, we were important partners in the third grouping in the world, the non-aligned movement, which primarily Nasser of Egypt, Nehru of India, and countries like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, these were the countries, and India was leading that group of 52 countries. It's all about mindset.
So but that was a tripolar word, and the personalities matter at that time. Now the personalities hardly matter. You are a unipolar, almost a unipolar word, where that kind of equation can't happen even there. Maybe Modi and Trump can walk together, handshake together, or she and Modi can walk on the banks of Narmada in Ahmedabad. But that kind of grouping can't happen even now. It is reality, isn't it?
Look, today we are in a slightly different kind of world. I do agree with you. We are no longer having one or two groupings in this world so that you can create a third grouping. We are living in a multipolar world. But in this multipolar world, India is also an important pole that India also has to recognize. Now, I also talked some time back about, I'm not very sure if that reference comes in this book or not, but I talked about India Club. Do we have one? We tried to create SARC. SARC was essentially an India club led by India. It's another matter. Because of certain neighborhood constraints, we could not take it forward too much. Then we upgraded it to become BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC could have been a good platform where India would have played an important role. Even now, there is a huge opportunity awaiting for India in the Indian Ocean region, in the Indo-Pacific region. That's why I'm saying India, it's important for India to be in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I don't deny that. It's important for us to be in G20, but also there should be some forums where India is a leading partner. You are leading it. You are in the important position there. That opportunity is coming, knocking at your doors in your Indo-Pacific region.
No, Mr. Ram Madhav, I'm just asking one question. You said because India comes first. Why because? India comes first.
It's from my perspective, whatever.
According to the Prime Minister, India comes first. Why?
Yeah,
because
whatever I wrote.
No,
sometimes my party can come first. Sometimes my other loyalties can come first. But whatever I have written in all these years, for me, I have written those things because India comes first. That is the whole idea behind giving that title to the book, that in this, it's not about my party. It's not about my even ideological commitments. It's about the country. For me, because India comes first.
Are you saying, Ram Madhav ji, that when party people think, they think of party first and India later? That is not the color of the BJP. No, they think India first. Because they think India first, therefore they are BJP, isn't it?
Yes. No, this collection of essays is not about just my party or my ideology alone. This is a collection which talks about India first. That's the whole purpose behind giving that title to it.
We have
Because India comes first.
little concept. Why use the word? Because there must be some meaning behind it. Or because the title is attractive. Maybe sometimes the author gives a title which can attract people to read the book. But I'm little now after listening to you after many years. I think that you should have been you should have been a diplomat. By accident you entered to politics, isn't it? Therefore, you have given up the responsibility of a direct responsibility BJP. You know
I,
much more diplomacy, economic as well as other diplomacy than many of the diplomats who were running the government do.
Prabhuji, I am in politics also by accident only. You know very well. I am an RSS supposed to be an RSS, but RSS has seconded me, loaned me to the BJP. That's why I am in politics. But for us in RSS, it is country first.
Mr. Madhav, I wanted to ask you another interesting point that you've raised, the de-hyphenation of India's relationship with Israel. And you're a great admirer of Israel, as are many. There are many closet admirers of Israel as well. But this government has made admiration of Israel a more open and acceptable idea. And you talk about de-hyphenating it. Talk a little about Israel as a model that India could possibly emulate.
Firstly, foreign policy at one level is a continuum. It is not partisan that every government has a new foreign policy. It's at one level, it's a continuum. But every government adds, every leader adds his own flavor, his own nuances to it. This dehyphenation that we are talking about, which I mentioned in one of my articles, is one important addition made by Prime Minister Modi to India's foreign policy. We started looking at our relations with the other countries from a purely bilateral prism, in the sense that we stopped looking at our relations with a given country from the prism of any third country. Like if I am going to have relationship with so and so country, how would so and so other country react? It is no longer the policy of our government in the last, if you notice, in the last 6 years. That's what I called as de-hyphenation. Hyphenation has caused a lot of harm to our interests in terms of our international relations. Now, in that, yes, India-Israel relationship has now grown into a standalone relationship. Earlier, everybody knew well that we wouldn't even go to Tel Aviv without going to Palestine. We wouldn't do anything in a standalone basis. Of course, neither with Palestine nor with Israel. We wouldn't do anything on a standalone basis. But we have given up that practice. Prime Minister Modi was the first Prime Minister to embark on a standalone visit to Israel. Now, India and Israel, right from the time of the PB Narasimha Rao government, when we established formal diplomatic relations, have developed strong trade ties on a bilateral basis. We have huge technological support coming from Israel in areas like agriculture and information technology areas, artificial intelligence, surveillance. In all these areas, we get a lot of support from Israel. It's a very high-tech, in fact, Israel's one description is it's a startup nation. See, the startups of Israel are of great advantage to India, and we have built that relationship over the last 2 decades. But Prime Minister Modi has given a new impetus to this relationship, which is one of the important bilateral relationships today, especially in terms of defense technologies, surveillance technologies, IT, and agriculture. In these areas, India and Israel enjoy very strong relationships. Beyond that, two countries, two politics. At the United Nations, we have supported Israel on some occasions, but we stood by our age-old position of supporting the cause of the Palestine also on many occasions.
But sir, the West doesn't necessarily follow that when it looks at India, especially the US, when it looks at India and Pakistan. And perhaps the Biden-Harris administration will revert to that hyphenated relationship between India and Pakistan. Do you fear that?
No, in fact, because of Prime Minister Modi's efforts, even America has changed its practice. I remember very well when Hillary Clinton came to India in 2011 as Secretary of State. She had to necessarily go to Islamabad. So it was decided that she would do a few hours stop over there. That used
Exactly.
to be practice. But remember, President Trump came, he went to many other countries.
Yeah.
So things are changing. The emphasis that we are putting on standalone relationships with countries is now being appreciated by many countries in the world.
But do
You
you
know,
feel that, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Chawla.
no, I was asking because you are talking about India as a powerful country. India led forum should be there, grouping should be there. If you look at the neighbors now, during the past couple of years, these relations are quite tough these days. It is, I won't say that you can lead even Nepal. Forget about him. Your army chief is going, everybody's going there. Your Burma relationship, I don't know where you stand. In terms of Bangladesh, there's a problem there. Sri Lanka, you have a problem. Pakistan, of course, is not a new problem. So what do you think that you are still not able to have good relationship where neighbors support you in the grouping which you are referring to? Why this relationship has soured over the past couple of years, if at all you agree with it?
No, it's a very important question, Prabhuji. I do appreciate the concerns that you expressed in your question. You see, in this region, which is I consider India's eastern neighborhood, the Indo-Pacific region, as the most important region for the entire world for the 21st century. Now, in this region, there are two rising big powers. One is India, the other one is China. Now, whether we like it or not, there is an inherent competition in between these two countries. It is a reality. Here, because of this competition, the kind of challenges that you talked about in the neighborhood, those challenges we are facing now. That is why I repeatedly I talked about that big power diplomacy earlier. Now India has to really strategize it in such a manner that its immediate neighborhood becomes more friendly with it. It's friendly. I mean, I'm not saying it's not friendly with us. They are friendly with us. And since you mentioned about countries like Nepal, let me tell you, with Nepal, India has always had hot and cold relationships. If you look at the last 5, 6 decades of the history, there have always been ups and downs. But there is a strong civilizational bond that is our major strength between our two countries. Similarly with Bangladesh, similarly with many other neighborhood countries. So India has to certainly improve these relationships. There are certain challenges. Everybody knows. Nobody can hide them under the carpet, push them under the carpet. But uh, I totally agree with you. That's my pet peeve. India has to think about.
Yes,
India
I
has to
agree
be
with you. Ram
power
Bhattaji,
diplomacy.
Kaveri started in the beginning the superpower, economic power, in that you refer to China and India competing in the neighborhood cell. लोग हिंदी में कहते हैं जब आपके पड़ोसी आपके साथ नहीं है बाकी कौन होगा आपके साथ. I'm coming back to the economic power because China has enormous economic power. They are investing almost in 175 countries, and neighbors they have also invested quite a lot. Pakistan, of course, they are taken over economically, but in other countries they are investing a lot which you can't compete. So where will you stand? Because money makes the mayor go. Money talks. You don't have the money to compete with China in terms of investment in Sri Lanka, investment in Maldives, investment in Burma, investment in Bangladesh. How are you going to compete? प्यार से खाना खिलाने से दिवाली की गिफ्ट देने से तो नहीं होगा ना.
International relations, in international relations, economy plays an important role. Nobody denies that fact. But you please remember that it is now globally accepted thing that merely because you have lot of money, you cannot really take over countries. I mean, you cannot simply control the countries. Uh, China has certain distinct advantages. No, nobody denies that. China, as you rightly said, is 4 times bigger in terms of economy compared to India. It's 4 times bigger than us in terms of its economic size of the economy. So it uses that economic muscle also. But I mean, if you look at what is happening for China in the world today, do you know that China has maximum number of countries against it today?
You see,
Right in the
diplomacy, Ram
right
Madhavji,
like last couple of months, right in the last couple of months, it could not get its people elected to several international bodies in the United Nations. So money, finance is important, but beyond that also there will be several other factors.
you see,
You
Ram
are not
Madhavji,
buying out countries by using your money. You are helping countries. There are many ways. There are many ways you build relationships, and India also has many strengths. It has to leverage those strengths.
no, I agree with you, but the question arises that during the past year, first term of Modi ji, you had political leadership leading the foreign ministry. They were able to know that because leaders talk to the leaders, they don't talk to the babus. But the question arises, you have a foreign secretary who becomes, I'm not saying he's very intelligent, he has done a good fundamental good job. A good babu cannot be a good minister, that is also possible. A good minister cannot be a good diplomat also. But I'm noticing the person who has served United States, China on the desk dealing with that. Do you think the top leaders like Biden and everybody else and the foreign minister of those countries and Secretary of State and United Pompeo came here and the everybody came, do you think they find comfortable dealing with a person who is just an officer of the here? He may be knowledgeable. I'm not questioning his knowledge. He's intellectual, very intellectually superior. But is that relationship between declining our relationship with the neighbors, because he has hardly been in the neighborhood, except China. So don't you think that there is some political input or content missing in the diplomacy?
I disagree with the analysis you have made about whether countries accept an officer as the representative of a country or not. The our foreign minister, whatever might be his previous experience, assignments, and all that, he is the foreign
Why,
minister of
Ramadi, I will
India.
give a contest. I'll just give it because
So
now you have
he
Kamala Harris there as a vice president, and our foreign minister
so
used to
if,
meet a person
if
close to her. It is
tomorrow
going to
somebody
come back.
tomorrow somebody can stand up and ask, what is the so and so's experience in the past experience? Since you mentioned about Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris was an attorney. Today she has become the vice president elect of America. Because she is vice president elect of America, she deserves to be respected. That is what happens when somebody occupies a particular position in the government. So our foreign minister, in the capacity of the foreign minister of India, enjoys great respect across the world in all the countries. The question is
You are
about
comparing,
priorities.
Ramadi,
The
you have
question is
Atal Bihari
about
Vajpayee as foreign minister. You had Pranab Mukherjee as foreign minister of the country. If you go back to illustrative foreign thing, you
uh,
compare them with Dr. Jaishankar, who's intellectually very
no, no,
superior.
no. Dr. Jaishankar is a very knowledgeable person, a very
I'm not questioning that at all.
I think then if you look at the list of foreign ministers, we have had many others. I don't want to name them because some of them were foreign ministers in another government are there in our party today. So
Sometimes
many things.
Babus
So
have a particular way of dealing with because they're not accountable 34 years,
I
38 years of service. They have not been accountable to anybody. Now suddenly you tell them to deal with the head of the state or head of the chief minister, then the prime minister, the foreign minister. Then there is some kind of a communication, as they call diplomacy, is a function of nuance also. It is how you put it, keeping the domestic interest in mind. When you are not serve the domestic interest in any manner, in political manner, you put diplomatic interest about domestic interest sometimes.
I disagree with that kind of analysis. But tomorrow somebody may stand up and say that somebody prime minister was an RSS pracharak. He has
Prime
become the
Minister has won elections and he is running the.
prime minister of the country. So each
He
person
is
by
dealing
his
with 1 billion
caliber,
people, not about with 500 IFS officers.
by his caliber, you have to look at the caliber of the person, but also the position he occupies. Itself gives you a lot of advantage, lot of respect, and all that. So I generally disagree with that kind of person-specific analysis of foreign policy. It's the policy of the government, and as I said, government needs to probably do much more.
Ram Madhavji, you've talked about hard power and soft power. And soft power is clearly somewhere where India can lead. And in fact, you talk about India and China being two civilizations. India can, in fact, become a leader of this India club through its soft power. Is that something that you would advocate and you would want to harness?
One of the advantages that India enjoys is definitely the soft power dimension. Because since we are discussing about our neighborhood, uh, in this neighborhood, India's civilizational cultural links play a very important role. One leader who has not hesitated to make it a clear diplomatic tool, the soft power dimension of our foreign policy as a diplomatic tool, was Prime Minister Modi. He has used it fully to promote India's ties with a number of countries. I have written about it in the book extensively. But I tell you, the world has moved on from this whole discourse of hard power, soft power, to world has moved on to what they described as smart power. It's a combination of hard and soft power, a smart power. Now, today, the world is talking about sharp power. Newer thinking in diplomacy, in foreign relations is now coming up. I only want to underscore one point, which is my conviction. Probably some may disagree with me. The influence of soft power has its limitations. Some people have very huge expectations from soft power. If we are a Hindu majority country and some other country in the neighborhood is a Hindu country, it must be with us. It doesn't
Now,
work.
Madhav,
Your soft power has also your limitations.
let us talk
Beyond that,
about the
you need to be a
current
soft power. You need to be a smart power.
No, let us talk about the current situation now that because now the polarization has taken place and you have got Vice President Biden becoming the president. And when he came here at that time, you can understand what kind of relationship was. You are part of the establishment. And now I can see that this Harris Biden combination, how they are going to look at Mr. Modi, who is perceived to be projected by the liberals as an ally of Trump.
Uh, Firstly, the newly elected leadership of the United States of America, they deserve our compliments or congratulations. Uh, the new leadership in America, Biden-Harris leadership, has huge domestic challenges to address.
He's the oldest president of the United
That,
States of
that
America.
hopefully they will take care of those things well. We wish them well. America is passing through one of its most difficult phases. That's for them to handle once they take over in January next year. I really don't see any major upheaval happening in India-US relations because of the change of dispensation in the US Pravoji. Because our bilateral relations stand on a very strong footing. It is, I mean, we are two countries which are described as natural allies. There are certain positions which the Democrats took when they were campaigning for their elections, like the ones that you mentioned. Probably they have seen us close to the Trump administration, or they have had certain views on Kashmir and all that. After all, we are sovereign countries. India's sovereign right has to be respected by other countries. As far as the misunderstanding part of it is concerned, what you are underlining, we have to make extra effort to remove it. That's what
Let us be
in
very
fact,
frank. On
Probably
Kashmir,
one sentence I want to
yeah,
add.
yeah,
In my
yeah, yeah.
latest article, I said, in politics, we fight over these issues. If it is politics, if somebody is talking against me on Kashmir, I will fight with him. In diplomacy, you have to reach out to him. You have to
Yes,
win him over.
Ram Madhav, you agree? You will agree the fulcrum of our diplomacy so far has been with the US and China around Kashmir most of the time because you are quoting America standing with you. When it came to China, also they stood by you. Now Kashmir becomes the issue in which you will not get the same support as you saying yourself. Their stand is well known as you got it from Trump. So where do you go from here? Pakistan gets revived. He was isolated for the time being. Don't you think revival of Pakistan will be some kind of a undoing which Modi ji has built with the US administration?
I don't want to comment upon hypothetical situations that would emerge in the coming months and years. But let me tell you, uh, There was an embargo on Prime Minister Modi. You all know about it. You know which dispensation removed that embargo? It was President Obama's dispensation, which was a Democrat dispensation. So there is
They
no
have to
reason
remove.
to there is no
If you
reason to
become head of the government by election, you elected, any government has to remove that
no before that
When
before
embargo
before
was put on him by the UK government, are sitting with him as
embargo.
included in that.
I'm not talking about his visa. I'm talking about embargo on Gujarat, dealing with Gujarat. That was lifted in 2012, 2013 by European countries and also the Americans. So my point is there is no reason to believe that the present government will suddenly give a lot of support to Pakistan, etc. No, we are also we also know we will certainly protect our sovereign interest, sovereign right. We will stand firmly on that. But we will also diplomatically reach out to them. We will tell them about the reality, ground reality. I tell you, when Obama was at the helm of affairs, we spent 2 years with him. I mean, Prime Minister Modi was here, President Obama was there. We had excellent equation with the Democrats. I don't see any reason why such a relationship cannot be established in the coming years.
Another time is short. Let's Kaveri ask the last question, which you
Yeah,
want to ask.
no, just one question, Mr. Chawla, then you can take the last one. Mr. Madhav, you were also very closely involved with the Kashmir policy. And I want to ask you, how do you think the BJP has handled Kashmir? In your time, you also advised them to ally with the PDP. We've seen what has happened now, the abrogation of Article 370. How does it reflect on us globally? What we have done in Kashmir. What do you think?
The first of all, as I said, these are all decisions of a sovereign government.
Hmm.
We are not taking those decisions to win certain compliments from other countries. They are taking those decisions, keeping India's interest, larger interest in mind. So on that, we are not apologetic about those decisions. As our party always held, those are very important historic, changes that have been affected to the political structure of that state, its integration with the rest of the country, its integration with the constitution of India. I think it's a long delayed one, long pending one. I remember in 1963, Prime Minister Nehru telling a delegation from Kashmir that no, it will go. This is what he told in 1963 to a delegation from Kashmir. But it finally happened in 2019. Uh, India has to explain its position. If somebody has any questions or somebody has any issues, we have to explain our position. That we will do. But there is no need to be any defensive or apologetic about our decision, which is well within the sovereign power of our government.
She asked a different question. Let me complete the last question. I think
Hmm.
your relationship with PDP, because you were handling Kashmir at that point in time. The question is, did you misjudge her because you wanted to have some kind of a capture power and show that here is a saffron flag flying in Srinagar now, and that hurry you compromise with certain principles. Also you misjudge the person who had not changed her heart. She may have changed her visible color with you, but her heart remained where it was earlier. And don't you regret your decision of joining hands with her?
Firstly, we joined hands with PDP when Mufti Muhammad Saeed was the leader of that party. There was a historic necessity because the situation, the mandate could be respected only by these two parties coming together. Otherwise, we would have to have gone for elections once again. So, looking at the complexity of the mandate, we decided we should work together. But that time it was Mufti Muhammad Saeed. Uh, there is a lot of difference. I can today say this openly. There is a lot of difference between Mufti Muhammad Saeed, his thinking, and his daughter's thinking then and now also. There is a difference.
You continue with the
Having
daughter.
dealt with both of them closely, I strongly believe there is a lot of difference. We could have uh, certainly continued for several more years, 3 years were left. We could have continued had Mufti been alive. But since you asked about exit,
Accepting her was as
so
an
it is
actual Mufti.
not
Let me You see, you accepted her. Let
Oh,
us
as I
now.
said,
If we go back, I'll close the discussion here by asking you a question. I'll ask you a final question. Close on that. That Ram Madhav, when listening to him for 35, 40 minutes, I feel that you seem to be a politician and a good diplomat. I think we should end with that.
I, no,
I'm sure he has a response to that.
Okay.
Mr. Madhav?
you want me to respond? You want me to respond?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. See, I don't consider myself to be a politician, so good or bad doesn't arise. I don't know what's your definition of
I'm talking in
politician.
context of Kashmir only, nowhere else. It is not an overall judgment.
No, not really. Kashmir, we have done such a wonderful work there that today the BJP's jinx that in Kashmir BJP can never be a ruling party has now gone forever. Whenever elections are held in Kashmir, take my words today, BJP will be a part of the ruling dispensation in Jammu and Kashmir. Without BJP, no future government in Kashmir. But as I said, maybe politics.
Yes, elections are going to happen soon. Soon we'll know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Madhav. Thank you so much, Mr. Chawla.
Thank you.
Thank you.